Hello and welcome to Randy's Tropical Plants. This week I'm going to be talking about the Barbados cherry tree. I get a lot of questions from people about what are good suggestions for trees to grow in Florida. Now, that's a difficult question to answer because I don't really know exactly where in Florida you are or exactly what kind of soil you have. More importantly, I don't really know what kind of taste you have. This fruit is the one that I tell people you gotta have. They're a little bit sour and they're not very sweet, but it's one of the juiciest fruits I've ever had in my life. And the best thing about this tree is that once it's established, it's going to produce fruit almost every day for the entire season. It starts somewhere in March and it ends sometime in December. It's October, I think 10th right now. It's absolutely packed full of fruit. And it's got flowers all over it right now. It's got young fruit sets on it right now, and it's got big red fruits on it right now, and it just kind of keeps producing that way. I love trees that do that. So many fruit trees, you get a whole lot of fruit all at once, and then you got to freeze it and then make smoothies out of it or something. Then the rest of the year you're just waiting for it to fruit again. This thing just keeps producing and producing. So there's a lot of good things about this fruit tree. It's easy to grow. There's really just one thing about it, is that you've got to maintain some nematode control for it. They are susceptible to root knot nematodes. They're really not a difficult tree to grow, but I'm going to show you some close-ups and talk a little bit more about how to grow this in Florida.
So you can see that the flowers look a little bit like crepe myrtle flowers. I think they're quite pretty. This tree will bloom sporadically throughout the warm months of the year. The fruits really do look like cherries. They don't taste like cherries though. They taste a bit more like a Granny Smith apple. The texture is melting texture and very, very juicy. I find them to be very pleasant. They produce very heavily and regularly. So you can see we have three different fruits here at three different levels of maturity. The one on the left is a little bit too ripe. It'll taste probably a little bit off. The one on the right is a little too underripe. It'll be a little too sour. The one in the middle is perfect. This has an orange melting flesh that's extremely juicy with 3 seeds in it. I eat these for breakfast almost every day. I love them. They're one of my favorites. Now, the care requirements for this tree are pretty basic. They definitely need full sun to produce as well as this. If they don't get at least 5 hours of direct light a day, you're probably not going to get really good fruit out of them. They will produce in a container, just not as much. So I grow this tree from cuttings. I root them out in a mist system, and they wind up being for sale about this size. One of the coolest things about this tree is that it'll start producing even at this size in a container. This has got 2 cherries on it. It's got some flowers over here too. And this is the size of them that I sell. So this is the size of them that I have for sale in my nursery. One of the coolest things about this plant is that it starts producing pretty much right away. So you will get small amounts of fruit for the first few years, but you'll start getting fruit almost right away. Great little tree. That will produce almost right away, and it'll continue to produce more and more every year as it gets bigger and bigger. About 5 years is when it starts producing really a lot, but you'll get fruits every year. I produce them via cuttings like that for a reason. They produce right away. They don't need a tap root. They're pretty tough trees and they're pretty vigorous trees. It is very difficult to grow this tree from seeds. I learned this the hard way. Before I ever bought this tree, this is a cultivar called Florida Sweet. I had been pilfering fruits and seeds from Marie Selby Gardens, and I could never get any of them to sprout. I probably tried 30 or 40 seeds and never got one to sprout. Now, if you were to look under this tree right now, there are little seedlings coming up from the seeds that drop on here, but hundreds of seeds drop on the ground here, and I get maybe 10 or
10 or 15 seedlings here and there. There's not a lot of them that sprout for some reason. I don't really know why. Now I've grown them out. I've grown out the seedlings from this tree, and the fruit that those seedlings grow, the resultant fruit, is really, really sour and not very good and kind of small. So I asexually reproduce these by cuttings, and you get really good trees out of them. And again, this is what that is. The original tree that I planted there got burned back by frost in 2017, or I'm sorry, 2010. And so I planted this the following year in 2011, so this has been in the ground for 7 years from a little tiny, for about the size of the plant I just showed you. So it takes about that long to get this size, but this thing produces just amazing amounts of fruit. So the care requirements for this tree are pretty basic. It needs full sun. It's got to have full sun to do well. I don't water this very much at all. It gets water at the times of year it needs water. Now, because these are not seedlings, they're cuttings from stem cuttings, they really do need a lot more care at first for a while. Once they get a nice root system established, they're fine. They're just like any other tree in this case. A lot of trees you can't do that with, but with these they do really well this way. I fertilize it with 10-10-10, maybe a few times during the growing season. I've been fertilizing this tree with 10-10-10 vegetable garden fertilizer. This is a cheap fertilizer that you can get in a granular form from feed stores or Home Depot or anywhere else that fertilizer is sold. It's cheap, and it's a good fertilizer for lots of different things. I don't do anything more special than that. I've gotten away with years of not fertilizing it. It still produces lots of fruit. The main trick with this plant, and it's really important, is that in Florida we have root knot nematodes. The one trick to growing this tree in Florida is to keep root knot nematodes from attacking the roots. It is a little bit sensitive to root knot nematodes. Now, those nematodes won't kill the tree, but they'll weaken it a little bit. They'll make it so that it can't absorb nutrients and water quite as well. So for it to be as healthy and productive as it possibly can be, you're going to have to do some nematode control. This is pretty easy. Mostly what you have to do is there's a little carpenter bee that's being territorial about its flowers that it's pollinating right now. If you want to control nematodes, basically you just have to keep weeds away, all other weeds and plants that are going to produce roots that the nematodes can use to reproduce themselves. And you want to have an organic matter layer over the top of the soil. This is really important. You need the soil to be covered, not just bare earth. But you don't want to have a bunch of weeds growing around it and no bare earth. So any good mulch, pine bark nuggets, cypress mulch, wheat straw. I know a guy that uses old carpet to cover the ground, and that works well too because the water goes through it. Probably doesn't look so nice, but it works. As long as you keep the ground covered, this tree is going to do well. These are wood chips that I got from a tree trimming company. They make a really good ground covering to keep nematodes away. If you don't want a tree trimming company to put a bunch of wood chips on your front lawn or on your front driveway, you can go to any garden center and get some cypress mulch or any other kind of good mulch like that, a good organic matter. These are pine bark nuggets. They're a good choice as well.
So you can see that I keep the ground around the base of the tree covered in wood chips and free of weeds, and this is something that you should maintain at all times for maximum health of the tree.
Now, root knot nematodes will not kill this tree, but they will affect the tree. And it's really easy. Basically, all you have to do to keep this tree from being horribly affected by root knot nematodes is to keep the area around the base of them completely free of weeds and grasses and anything else that's going to breed the nematodes. And then keep that same area covered in mulch or wood chips, you know, wheat straw would work, oak leaves would work. I like wood chips. I use wood chips that I get from tree trimming companies. I used to use cypress mulch. That works just as well. But you got to cover the ground, and you've got to keep the weeds away. If you notice that it's got plenty of water, but during the hot part of the day it's wilting really badly, it's probably got some nematode damage. But again, it won't kill the tree, it'll just weaken it. It's really the only major thing. Occasionally I get ants farming scale on it. They haven't been doing that this year, which is great. The biggest problem you're going to have with this tree are birds and squirrels stealing your fruit, and they're going to come every day. Now I get big flocks of cardinals that come in here. They love these things, and I kind of like the fact that the cardinals come in my yard, so I just let them have them. You could throw some bird netting over it. I don't. I like the birds. I share my fruit with the birds, but that's really the biggest problem is that I've also had people stealing the fruit off of this tree a lot. There was a woman that used to come into my yard every day with grocery bags and steal every fruit on the tree. She hasn't been around in a while. But I love this tree. It's a really, really good tree for Florida, probably for Southern California too. Frost will damage the tree. It's actually pretty cold tolerant, but I've had in 2010 the tree that was in the ground, it died from frost. We got 10 days in a row of frost, and it died to the ground. So frost will kill it if it's bad enough, but most years I don't really even cover it, and it maybe gets a little singed on some of the leaves, but it's mostly fine. It's actually pretty cold tolerant as long as the frost isn't for a very long period of time. Well, today is November 3rd, and the fruit tree is still covered in fruit. There's fruit all over the ground. It's producing more fruit than I can eat, and it'll continue to produce like that until around the middle of December or so, and then it starts again in March. So I really love this tree. If you've watched this far, one thing I didn't mention about this fruit is it's got the highest vitamin C of any palatable fruit. There's fruits out there that have higher vitamin C than this one, but they're not delicious like this one is. So it's a great tree to have. I do sell them in my nursery. If you have any further questions, please feel free to email me at the email below. And if you've watched this far, thank you so much. And if you're one of my subscribers, thank you so much. I love you guys. And if you're not, subscribe, and I'll be producing lots more videos like this. Thanks a lot.